I register the first fracture at 1437 Imperial Standard, third week of the Miriandale Compliance Action. 20 years of service, 7,300 days, and I can time-stamp the precise moment my faith died. Sister Superior Cassiel ordered Elohim's squad forward into Habitation Block Sigma 7. We encountered 147 civilians. They knelt when we entered. That is the detail I return to. They knelt. I was Sister Evangeline then. The name still meant something. I'd taken my vows at the Schola Progenium on Ophelia 7, age 14, after my family died in a reactor failure. Standard conscription protocols for war orphans with appropriate genetic markers. The conditioning took 3 years. Prayer rituals at 5 o'clock. Combat training at 6 o'clock. Theological instruction at 9 o'clock. Weapons maintenance at 13 o'clock. New evening devotions at 2000. I learned to field strip a bolter in 40 seconds. I learned that doubt was the first symptom of corruption. I learned that the God Emperor required absolute faith, and I gave it to him without reservation. For 20 years, I gave it to him without reservation. The civilians knelt in the gray dust of their hab block. Standard Imperial citizens, malnutrition markers visible, work designate tattoos faded on their forearms, clothing patched and repatched. Ages ranged from approximately 8 years to 63. I logged their positions automatically. Defensive cluster formation, non-combatants placing themselves between us and the children. Standard protective behavior. No weapons visible. No heretical iconography. The air smelled like recycled protein and machine oil and fear sweat. His Sister Superior Cassiel activated her Helm's Vox amplification. These HAB units have been in proximity to heretical elements, possible exposure to corrupting influence. The Ecclesiarchy's mercy requires purification. One of the men, designation approximate, male, 40 years, work-scarred hands, looked up. "We are faithful," he said. His voice carried the particular steadiness of someone who believed what he was saying would matter. "We attend devotionals. We tithe. We pray to the Emperor morning and night. We are faithful." Cassiel raised her bolter. Faith compromised by proximity to heresy is faith already lost. I had heard variations of this logic 500 times across 2 decades of compliance actions. The formulation was standard. Now, the theological reasoning was sound within imperial doctrine. Corruption spreads through observation, through proximity, through the mere knowledge that alternatives to faith exist. Cauterize the wound, purge the contaminated tissue. The Imperium survives through amputation. I had accepted this reasoning 500 times. "Sister Evangeline," Cassiel said, "you will perform the Emperor's mercy. Begin with the adult males." I stood there. My armor's servo motors hummed at idle frequency. The sound I had fallen asleep to for 20 years, the sound that meant safety, purpose, righteousness. The bolter in my hands weighed 6.8 kilograms. Loaded. I had fired it in combat 312 times. I had killed 147 enemies of the Imperium, heretics, mutants, xenos, traitors. Always enemies, always threats. And the man with the work-scarred hands knelt in the dust with his eyes closed, praying. His lips moved. I recognized the words, the litany of protection, standard form, no deviations. His pronunciation was perfect. "Sister Evangeline," Cassiel repeated. "Obey." The children were crying. Quiet crying, the learned silence of people who have discovered that noise attracts attention, and attention attracts violence. I registered 9 children between ages 8 and 14. The youngest clutched a worn fabric object, possibly a devotional icon, possibly a toy. I could not determine which. "No," I said. The word emerged before I had processed the decision. 20 years of conditioning, 7,000 days of theological instruction, 1,500 prayers to the God Emperor, and my mouth produced a syllable that negated everything I'd been made into. "Explain your refusal," Cassiel said. Her voice remained level. "Command protocol, provide opportunity for compliance before escalating to disciplinary measures." "They are faithful," I said. "They show no signs of corruption. They knelt when we entered. They pray to the Emperor. They are—" I searched for the correct doctrinal formulation. "They are his subjects. We are his instruments. Instruments do not destroy what they are meant to protect." Cassiel's helm turned toward me. I could not see her expression behind the red ceramite, but I had served under her command for 8 years. I knew the cant of her head, the particular quality of her silence. "The enemy is subtle," she said. "Corruption does not always manifest in visible corruption. Sometimes it manifests in excessive sympathy, in questioning, in the belief that we, with our limited perception, can determine the Emperor's will with greater accuracy than our superiors. You are demonstrating symptoms, Sister Evangeline." "I am demonstrating assessment," I said. "Tactical analysis. These civilians present no threat. Our ammunition is finite. Our time is finite. There are actual heretics 3 blocks north. We detected their Vox signatures 2 hours ago. These people are praying to the Emperor while we waste combat resources on—" "Obedience," Cassiel interrupted, "is not a waste of resources. Obedience is the resource. Faith that questions is faith already compromised. Step aside." She raised her bolter. I watched her finger move to the trigger. The man with the work-scarred hands was still praying. No, he had not opened his eyes. Perhaps he believed that if he prayed sincerely enough, precisely enough, the God Emperor would intervene. Perhaps he believed the Emperor protects. Cassiel fired. The bolter's report in the enclosed hab block was 130 decibels, loud enough to cause permanent hearing damage to unaugmented humans. The mass-reactive round entered the man's chest and detonated. The explosion scattered him across a 3-meter radius. Blood spatter patterns indicated arterial compromise and immediate cessation of cardiac function. Time of death: 1441 Imperial Standard. The children screamed. Not quiet anymore. Cassiel worked through the adults systematically. 13 executions. Elapsed time: 4 minutes, 20 seconds. She reloaded once. The bolter's machine spirit, or the weapon's mechanical function, so I could no longer determine which interpretation I believed, accepted the new magazine without complication. When she finished with the adults, she turned to the children. "No," I said again. I stepped between her and the survivors. My bolter was not raised. I had not decided to raise it, but I had not decided not to raise it. My hands knew the weight. My muscle memory knew the motion. 20 years of training prepared me to aim at anything, including my sister superior. My mind had not caught up to what my body was calculating. "Final opportunity," Cassiel said. "Lower your weapon and step aside, or I classify you as compromised and refer you for repentia protocols." I stood there. The children were behind me. 9 children. 9 civilians who had committed no crime except proximity to someone who had been near someone who might have heard heretical words. The theological logic was sound. The Imperium spans 1,000,000 worlds. Corruption spreads. Purge the infected. The calculus was simple. The man had been praying. Perfectly. He had believed. I stepped aside. Cassiel executed the children, 9 rounds. The youngest died still clutching the fabric object. I could see now it was a small devotional banner, hand-sewn, depicting the Imperial Aquila in crude but reverent stitching. The work had taken hours. Someone had made it with love. When Cassiel finished, she lowered her bolter and turned to me. "I'm filing a report of wavering faith. You will undergo theological re-instruction and penance rituals upon return to the convent. Now you are confined to non-combat duties until the canonist determines your fitness for continued service. Understood? Understood, I said. We left the Hab block. Behind us, 147 bodies cooled in the grey dust. The youngest had been 8 years old. The devotional banner lay in a spreading pool of blood, the golden aquila slowly saturating to red. I logged the timestamp. I archived the data. I walked back to the transport in formation, my boots leaving prints in the dust, my armor's servo motors humming their familiar hymn. My faith died at 1441 Imperial Standard. My body continued. The canoness was efficient. She reviewed Cassiel's report, interviewed me for 40 minutes, and determined that I was not corrupted, merely shaken. Shaken was correctable. The Adepta Sororitas had protocols for shaken. Prayer, penance, a re-instruction, 3 weeks of intensive theological counseling. I knelt on stone floors for 6 hours daily while Dialogue's sister Matthias recited the doctrines of faith. Faith is the soul's armor, she said. Doubt is the first fissure. Through fissures, corruption enters. The Emperor provides strength to those who submit to his will without question. Do you submit, Sister Evangeline? I submit, I said. The words came easily. 20 years of conditioning made certain words automatic. I submit was one of them. The Emperor protects was another. My faith is pure was a third. I could recite them while my mind processed other data. I discovered this during the 2nd week. I could pray perfectly while simultaneously calculating trajectory angles for bolter fire. My mouth produced devotional language while my consciousness archived the memory of 9 children dying for proximity to possible corruption. Sister Matthias seemed satisfied. She reported my progress as adequate. The canoness reviewed my psychological metrics, whatever mechanisms the sisterhood used to measure faith. I apparently still registered within acceptable parameters. After 3 weeks, she restored me to combat duty. I returned to Elohim Squad. Cassiel greeted me with a formal blessing. We deployed to the next compliance action. I performed my duties precisely as I had been trained. The difference was internal. The conditioning remained. My body knew its function. When the order came to advance, I advanced. When the enemy appeared, I fired. When the prayer ritual began, I knelt and recited the words. But behind the recitation, and behind the obedience, behind the perfect performance of faith, nothing. A hollow space where certainty had been. I said the words, "The God Emperor watches over his faithful," while thinking, he watched over 147 civilians who believed in him. He watched Cassiel execute them. He watched and did nothing because he is a corpse on a throne, a dead man sustained by machinery, and we pray to a body that cannot hear us. Heretical thoughts, capital crimes. If I had spoken them, summary execution. But I did not speak them. I kept my mouth producing the correct sounds while my mind archived the truth. Faith was a control mechanism, prayer was compliance protocol, and the Emperor was whatever the ecclesiarchy required him to be. He was merciful when mercy served imperial interests. He was wrathful when wrath served imperial interests. He was, ultimately, whatever kept the sisterhood fighting. I fought. I had been trained for nothing else. The conditioning did not disappear because I stopped believing. When the Vox order came to advance, my legs obeyed. When my armor's auspex detected enemies, my hands raised the bolter. The machine of my body continued to function. I simply stopped experiencing that function as righteous. For 10 years, I performed the part of Sister Evangeline, faithful warrior of the Adepta Sororitas. I prayed at 5 o'clock. I maintained my weapons. I fought in 17 major campaigns. I killed enemies of the Imperium, or rather, people designated as enemies. I stopped being able to differentiate between heretic and person who refused to comply. Perhaps there had never been a difference. And perhaps I had always been killing people who said no, and the theological apparatus simply provided justification. I observed my sisters. They believed. When Sister Bethany spoke the litany of faith, tears streamed down her scarred face. Actual tears, actual emotion. She felt the Emperor's presence. When Sister Seraphine charged into combat, screaming the hymns, she believed she was immortal in his service. Some of them died believing. I held Sister Ophelia while she bled out from a heretic stubber round, and her last words were, "The Emperor receives me." She smiled. She believed she was going to him. I envied them. The thought was novel, envy directed at my own sisters, but they had something I could never reclaim. They believed the suffering meant something. When we lost squad members, and they grieved but found comfort in doctrine. The fallen had died in his service. Their sacrifice mattered. They would be remembered. I knew we would be replaced. The Schola Progenium had more orphans. The sisterhood had more novices. We were components in a vast machine, and when components failed, you installed new ones. I could not speak this aloud. So I knelt with them during memorial services. I recited the prayers for the fallen. I said the words, "They died in his light," while thinking, they died because someone gave an order, and doctrine required obedience, and the machine requires fuel. Year 3 of my faithless service, I met Brother Sergeant Kalen. His Tempster scions were providing support for our operation on Vallis Prime, purging a suspected Genestealer cult from the Underhive. He coordinated fire support, efficient, in a professional, taciturn. I filed him initially as irrelevant, another Imperial soldier performing another Imperial function. Then I observed him hesitate. We had cornered a group of cultists in a dead-end tunnel. 23 contacts, ages variable, all marked with a xenoform corruption of the Genestealer strain, extra limbs, cranial deformation, chitin growths. Clear targets. The order came to purge. His unit advanced, then he raised his hand, and his squad halted. "Civilians present," he voxed, "mixed with the cultists. Request clarification on rules of engagement." I moved forward to assess. He was correct. Among the corrupted forms, I registered 14 individuals with no visible mutations. They clustered in the center, surrounded by the cult-marked. Hostages? Family members not yet transformed? So the classifications mattered for doctrine, but not for outcome. Extraction protocols required too much time. The cult had to be purged. That meant everyone in the tunnel. "Purge order stands," command voxed. "The Emperor's mercy is swift." Kalen stood there for 3 seconds. I timed it. 3 seconds while his squad waited and the cultists prayed in their xenoform tongue, and the unmutated civilians stared at us with the particular expression of people who understood what was about to happen. Then he lowered his hand and gave the order. His scions opened fire. The tunnel became a kill box. Hellgun lasfire at that range and density doesn't leave bodies. It leaves cauterized components. The smell of burned flesh flooded my helm's atmospheric filters. I watched Kalen stand absolutely still while his men performed the purge. For his vitals registered on my auspex. Elevated heart rate, shallow respiration, stress indicators visible in his thermal signature. After the action, I found him in the regimental staging area. He was cleaning his hell gun with the particular precision of someone performing ritual to avoid thinking. I approached. He glanced up. "Sister Evangeline," he said. Standard acknowledgement. "Professional." "You hesitated," I said. Not an accusation, an observation. His hands continued working. Disassembly, cleaning, inspection, reassembly. No hesitation logged in my after-action report. "But you hesitated." He set down the weapon and looked at me directly. His eyes were gray, I noted. A useless detail. I archived it anyway. 14 civilians, he said, I counted them. Before. I always count. Why? Because someone should. He picked up the hell gun again. They tell us the Emperor knows every soul that falls in his service. Maybe. But I count anyway. Someone should know their number. I sat down across from him, improper, casual, outside protocol. 147, I said. I count too. He understood. I watched the understanding reach him, the way his shoulders dropped fractionally, the way his cleaning rhythm changed. How long? He asked. 10 years. 3 for me, he said, since I realized. He did not specify what he had realized. He did not need to. We spoke for 40 minutes, not theology, not doctrine. We compared numbers. He had been counting for 3 years, 1,095 days. His tally was 632 civilians killed under orders he had given or followed. Children, 81. He knew the exact number. I told him my numbers, 147 from Miriandel, plus 238 from subsequent actions where I had participated in purges of compromised populations. Children, 73. Do you still believe? He asked. I could have lied. Every instinct of survival said to lie, but he had shown me his heresy, the counting, the remembering, the implicit acknowledgement that these deaths mattered enough to archive. No, I said, not since Miriandel, but I continue. Because there's nothing else, he said. Yes, he nodded. Same. He finished reassembling his hell gun and stood. We deploy again at 6 o'clock. The Emperor protects, sister. The Emperor protects, I replied. The formula was automatic, meaningless. But when he said it, and I heard the same hollow quality I produced when I said it. We were performing a script for any potential observers, 2 Imperial soldiers exchanging proper devotional farewells. He walked away. I watched him go and felt something I had not experienced in 10 years. Recognition. Someone else knew. Someone else continued the motions while carrying the weight of those numbers. Over the next 4 months, we deployed together on 3 operations. We did not seek each other out. That would have attracted attention. But when circumstances placed us in proximity, we spoke. Brief exchanges, carefully neutral in content for anyone monitoring, but coded in the way hollow people recognize each other's emptiness. During the Golan Purge, after we had cleared a Hab tower of suspected heretics, I found him on the roof. But he was looking out over the hive city, kilometers of humanity stacked in ferro-crete towers, billions of souls compressed into impossible density, all of them serving the Imperium's vast machinery. How many people do you think live here? He asked. I consulted my tactical database. Estimates place Hive Golan's population at 14 billion. 14 billion, he repeated. And if we received orders to purge the entire hive, we would do it. Yes, and we would call it righteous. I said nothing. Agreement was too dangerous, even with someone who understood. He turned to face me. I have a son, he said. Did you know that? Before conscription, I was 18. She died in childbirth, both of them. Sometimes I think about what he would be now, 23 years old. Would he be Imperial Guard? Would he be a worker in some factorum, believing his labor matters? Would he be one of the numbers I count? Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I can't tell anyone else, he said. Because you're the only person I've met in 3 years who might understand. Because I'm tired of carrying it alone. I understood the weight he described. The numbers we counted, they accumulated. 632 for him, 385 for me. Each one a person who had believed they mattered or hoped they mattered, or at least wanted to continue existing. We had ended them, not personally, always. Sometimes we had simply been present or provided support, or followed orders that resulted in their deaths, but we had participated. We were components in the machinery that converted living humans into compliance statistics. I understand, I said. For 4 months, he was my anchor, the person who proved I was not alone in this hollow continuation. We did not speak of escape. There was no escape. Desertion resulted in execution. The Imperium's reach was infinite. We were bound by conditioning, by training, by the simple fact that we had been made into instruments, and instruments do not remake themselves. But knowing someone else carried the same weight made the carrying possible. 4 months. 123 days. Then came Volantis 7. Chemical weapons deployed against our positions. Non-standard compounds, possibly Heratech manufacture, designed to compromise rebreather seals. His unit was forward of our position when the bombardment hit. I monitored the Vox traffic, heard the calls for evacuation, heard the casualty reports accumulating. I found him in the field medici station. So they had him on a cot in the corner. Triage had already classified him terminal. The chemical agent had destroyed his lungs. I could hear the sound, wet, rattling, the noise of tissue liquefying. His skin had grayed. Subcutaneous hemorrhaging marked his neck and face. The medici had given him something for pain, but nothing could repair this kind of damage. Not here, not with field resources. Maybe in a proper facility, maybe with full augmetic replacement, maybe if he mattered enough to justify the expense. He did not matter enough. I knelt beside him. His eyes opened. Grey, I remembered they were grey, and he recognized me. His hand moved, seeking. I took it. His grip was weak. "Evangeline," he said. My name, not my title. We had never used first names. "Count me." "No," I said. "Count." He coughed. Blood came up, and the medici had turned away to prioritize someone salvageable. I was alone with him. "Count me." 633. "You were not a civilian," I said. "You were a soldier. You knew—" "Count me," he said again. "Please, someone has to—" His breath stopped. Resumed. "Someone has to know." I felt something crack behind my ribs, in the hollow place where faith had been. Not pain. I had forgotten what pain felt like. Something worse. The recognition that the only person who had mattered to me in 10 years was dying. And he was dying asking me to add him to my count of losses. Because even dying, he wanted someone to acknowledge that his existence had significance. 633, I said. He smiled. The blood made it terrible. Red teeth, red lips. But it was genuine. The first genuine expression I had seen in months, maybe years. "Thank you," he said. His eyes were open, but his pupils had fixed. I waited for the next breath. It did not come. I checked his vitals with my armor's medical auspex. Cardiac arrest, 1847 Imperial Standard. The machine registered his death with neutral precision. I sat there holding his hand until his body temperature dropped to match the ambient air. The Medicae station continued operations around me. Soldiers brought in, soldiers stabilized or classified terminal, soldiers removed for burial or augmetic processing. The machine continued. Components failed, components were replaced. Kalen had been a component. He had known he was a component. He had asked me to count him anyway, to assign him significance he knew he did not possess. I added him to my count. Not 633. That was his number, and he had taken it with him. And mine. 386. One more person whose death I had witnessed, participated in, or contributed to through my continued service in the mechanism that required death. I prayed over him. Not because I believed the Emperor would receive him, not because I thought the prayers mattered, but because it was the ritual, and rituals were all I had left. I recited the prayer for the fallen while thinking, "You died for nothing. Your son died before you could know him. 633 people died because you followed orders. Now you're dead because the Imperium deployed chemical weapons against itself, because purging this world mattered more than preserving the soldiers doing the purging. You counted them because you needed to believe the counting mattered. It didn't. They're gone. You're gone. The numbers mean nothing. I finished the prayer. I released his hand. I returned to my unit. Sister Superior Cassiel asked if I was well. I said yes. She assigned me to the next operation. I loaded my bolter and advanced when ordered. The machine of my body continued. After Kalen, I stopped trying to preserve anything inside myself. The hollow place had held one connection, one recognition of shared understanding. Now it held nothing. I performed my duties with the precision of someone who had learned that precision was all that remained. The sisterhood required prayers. I prayed. Battles. I fought. Obedience. I obeyed. The conditioning made it easy. My mouth produced devotional language. My hands maintained weapons. My body knelt during rituals and stood during inspections and marched in formation when ordered. Years passed. Then I stopped tracking time in meaningful increments. Campaigns blurred together. Compliance actions, purges, crusades. The terminology varied, but the function remained identical. We advanced. We identified enemies, or designated enemies, or created enemies by our presence. We killed them. We moved to the next location. I killed in 18 different systems. I executed heretics and xenos and traitors and people who refused to tithe and people who prayed to the wrong aspect of the Emperor and people who happened to be in structures we needed to destroy. I stopped counting. The numbers had mattered to Kalen. They had mattered to me when I thought someone else understood their weight. Without him, they were just data accumulation. Meaningless. I met others who might have mattered. 3 of them across 6 years. But none reached the significance Kalen had achieved. Brother Constantine, a Tempestus drop trooper. He approached me after an operation on Meridian Tertius, where we had purged a worker uprising. 4,000 laborers dead because their quotas had become impossible, and they had stopped working in protest. We gunned them down in the factorum halls. Afterward, he said to me, they weren't armed. Just that. An observation. I agreed. He looked at me like he was searching for something, recognition perhaps, or permission to doubt. I gave him neither. He walked away. 2 weeks later, his squad deployed on a high-altitude drop that malfunctioned. 20 scions lost to equipment failure. I logged his death without ceremony. Interrogator Hadrian, assigned to verify our unit's purity after a sister fell to chaos corruption, and he interviewed each of us privately. When my turn came, he asked the standard questions about faith, about doubt, about my certainty in the Emperor's divinity. I gave the standard answers, but he watched me with the particular attention of someone who recognized performance. At the end, he said, "You believe none of this." Not a question, a statement. I replied, "I believe I will serve until I die. Isn't that sufficient?" He considered this and wrote something in his report. Then he said, "No, but it will have to be." He left after completing his investigation. I never learned if he reported me or simply classified my hollowness as within acceptable parameters. The sisterhood took no action. Apparently, faithless service was adequate as long as the service continued. Guardsman Pyrrhus, a conscript from a hive world, unassigned to our support column during the Validus campaign. He was 17. I know this because he told me during a supply distribution when I handed him his ration pack. 17 years old, he said. 3 weeks of training. They gave us laser guns and told us the Emperor would guide our aim. He laughed, not joyful, the sound of someone who had discovered the joke but found it not funny. He died 6 days later when our column was ambushed. A stub round entered his throat. He bled out in 40 seconds. I watched him die with the same expression he'd had when laughing, recognition of a joke that wasn't funny. None of them reached me. I registered their presence, their doubt, their deaths. I logged them as data, but the hollow place remained hollow. Kalen had been the only person who understood long enough to matter. After him, I stopped looking for understanding. I simply continued. The sisterhood deployed me to training duties after 28 years of active service. Standard rotation, experienced sisters returned to convents to instruct novices, passing combat knowledge to the next generation. I found myself standing before classes of girls, ages 14 to 16, fresh from the Schola Progenium, eager and faithful, and convinced they would serve the Emperor gloriously. I taught them to kill, field-stripping weapons, combat formations, target acquisition, prayer rituals during battle. I demonstrated the proper firing stance for a bolter. I corrected their devotional recitations. I supervised their training exercises, where they learned to advance under fire and hold positions and die for the Emperor if necessary. They believed. I watched faith in their eyes while I explained how to identify heretical markings, how to recognize corruption, how to execute without hesitation. They absorbed the lessons with reverence. This was their purpose. This was holy work. The God Emperor had called them to his service, and they would serve him perfectly. I was training them to become me, to follow orders, to kill designated targets, to pray without thinking, to continue until they died or broke or hollowed out. I was teaching them the motions that would carry them through 20 years, 30 years, 40 years of service. Some would die believing, some would die doubting, some would die hollow. But they would all die serving a machine that required their deaths. I performed this duty for 4 years. 147 novices passed through my instruction. I do not know how many of them survived their first deployment. I do not know how many believed until the end. I do not know if any of them realized what I was, a biological automaton performing the function of faith instructor without possessing faith, demonstrating devotion I did not feel, preparing them for service in a system that would consume them exactly as it had consumed me. One of them asked me, during private instruction, "Sister Evangeline, when did you know the Emperor had called you?" Her name was Celestine, 16 years old, dark hair, burn scar on her left hand from a training accident. She believed so thoroughly I could see it in her posture, the way she held herself like a weapon waiting to be wielded. I could have lied, and the correct answer was simple. Some variation of, "I knew from the moment I took my vows," or "His call was clear and certain." Instead I said, "I knew when I stopped being able to refuse." She considered this. "Faith is obedience," she said, quoting doctrine. "Yes," I said, "and obedience is service." "Yes." "Then you have served him faithfully, sister. Your years of service prove your faith." I looked at her. This child who believed actions demonstrated belief, who thought my 28 years of killing meant I possessed faith rather than conditioning. "Perhaps," I said. She smiled. She believed she had understood something profound. I had given her the wrong lesson, but she had converted it into the correct one through the alchemy of faith. She believed I was humble, that I doubted my own worthiness, but continued serving anyway. Man, she saw faithfulness where I knew only hollowness existed. I taught her to kill heretics. She learned well. After 32 years of service, the sisterhood deployed me to a garrison position on Sanctum 7, an agri-world on the eastern fringe. Low-threat assignment, no active conflicts, just presence maintenance and ritual observance. I conducted weekly inspections of the local PDF, led devotionals for the civilian population, and maintained combat readiness protocols in case of enemy action that never came. I had time. That was the curse. Active deployment filled the hours with necessary functions: advance, engage, eliminate, reposition, maintain equipment, rest, repeat. Garrison duty left hours empty. I filled them with routine. Morning prayers at 500, equipment maintenance at 600, inspection rounds at 900, and afternoon training at 1300, evening devotionals at 2000. Between these scheduled functions, silence. The silence was where the counting lived. I'd stopped counting during active service because Kaelin's death had rendered the numbers meaningless, but in the silence, the numbers returned. Not as a practice I chose, as an automatic process. My mind archived them. 386. No, more than that now. 412, accounting for the action since Volantis 7. 412 people I had killed or participated in killing. Civilians specifically. The enemy combatants numbered higher. 2,461 confirmed kills across 32 years. But I did not count those. Combatants had chosen their opposition or been conscripted into it or at minimum posed threat. The 412 had been designation targets, purged for proximity to heresy, for insufficient faith, for being present when purges were ordered. I could remember specific faces if I permitted the recall. The man with work-scarred hands on Miriandol praying with perfect pronunciation. The child with the devotional banner. The woman on Validus who had pleaded in flawless High Gothic, demonstrating her education, her loyalty, her usefulness, shot anyway because the purge order did not include exceptions for linguistic ability. The elderly man on Golan who had shown me his military service tattoos, proving he had served in the Imperial Guard for 20 years, executed anyway because his HAB unit had been marked for clearance, and clearance meant everyone. I archived them in the silence. My mind processed the data because I had been trained to process data. Threat assessment, target identification, casualty documentation, all standard cognitive functions for a sister of battle. But the targets were dead civilians, and the threat had been designation rather than action, and the casualties were people who had believed the Emperor would protect them. During my 16th month on Sanctum 7, I experienced a period of isolation that demonstrated what my consciousness had become. A warp storm disrupted system traffic. Nothing catastrophic. No demon incursions, no ship losses, just interference that made travel inadvisable. Sanctum 7's garrison was non-critical, so resupply stopped. My convent normally housed the 12 sisters. 8 had been off-world during the storm's onset, attending a pilgrimage to the cardinal world. And that left 4 of us, myself, Sister Superior Hadriel, and Sisters Verity and Dominica. The storm lasted 6 months. During month 3, Sisters Verity and Dominica received orders to investigate a potential heretic sighting in the southern agricultural zones. They departed. They did not return. We eventually found their bodies, ambushed by a cult cell we had not known existed, killed during what should have been a routine investigation. Sister Superior Hadriel received emergency deployment orders during month 4. A neighboring system was under Xenos assault and required immediate reinforcement. She departed on the last ship willing to risk the warp storm's periphery. The transit killed them. Warp incursion during jump, all hands lost. I received notification 3 weeks after her departure. I was alone. The convent was designed for 12. It felt vast with one occupant. I maintained routines. Morning prayers in the chapel, my voice echoing in a space built for devotional chorus. Equipment maintenance in the armory, 12 sets of armor standing empty, 12 bolters waiting for hands that would not return until resupply. Inspection rounds through empty halls, training exercises I performed solo, my movements precise and automatic. 3 months alone. 94 days of consciousness without external input, except what I generated through routine. I discovered what my mind did when unstimulated. It counted. 386. No, 412. No, higher now. I had been present for additional purges I had not actively logged. 427, each one archived with whatever details I had observed, ages when known, not expressions when visible, last words when audible. Most had prayed. That was the pattern I had not consciously registered until the isolation provided processing time. They had prayed. They had believed the prayers would matter. They had performed the devotional language correctly, with appropriate reverence, demonstrating their faith in the moments before we executed them. The man on Miriandel, the civilians on Validus, the families on Golan. They had all prayed. I prayed during my isolation because prayer was routine. I knelt in the chapel at 5 o'clock and recited the morning devotional. My voice was the only voice. No chorus, no response, no affirmation. Just my words in an empty chamber. Speaking to an emperor I did not believe was listening. I prayed because not praying was heresy, and heresy was execution, and even alone, with no witnesses, the conditioning would not permit me to stop. My mouth produced the words automatically. My mind processed other data. My body went through motions it had performed 10,000 times. During the 3rd month of isolation, I began speaking to the empty armor suits in the armory. Not consciously, I would register myself mid-sentence, explaining something to Sister Verity's vacant armor about the proper maintenance cycle for bolter firing mechanisms, or reciting a report to Sister Superior Hadriel's empty helm about PDF inspection findings. My mind had begun generating external input to compensate for the absence of actual external input. I stopped. I stood in the armory and observed myself. Sister Evangeline, 32 years of service, alone in a convent, knew speaking to empty armor because isolation had begun degrading my processing functions. I was a consciousness trapped in a biological system trained for one purpose, deprived of that purpose, continuing the motions anyway because the motions were all the system knew. I thought about cessation. My bolter was maintained, loaded, functional. I could place the barrel beneath my chin, fire, end the processing. It would be efficient. The isolation would end. The counting would end. The hollow continuation would end. I did not do it. Not because I believed suicide was sinful. I had stopped believing in sin when I stopped believing in the Emperor's divinity, not because I feared death. I had walked into combat 217 times. I understood death was cessation and cessation was neutral. I did not do it because the conditioning would not allow it. My body refused the action. My hands would not position the weapon. 32 years of training, 10,000 hours of conditioning, and my biological system had been programmed to continue regardless of whether continuation served any purpose. So I continued. I prayed to an emperor I did not believe in. I maintained equipment for a unit that no longer existed. I performed routines for an institution that had forgotten my existence during a warp storm's duration. I spoke to empty armor when isolation degraded my processing. I existed because my body knew how to exist and nothing else. The warp storm cleared during month 6. Resupply ships arrived. 8 new sisters were assigned to the garrison. The convent filled again with voices, with activity, as with the noise of the machine resuming function. They asked if I was well. I said yes. They asked if isolation had been difficult. I said no more than expected. They seemed satisfied with these responses. I resumed my duties. Morning prayers in a full chapel, inspection rounds with actual soldiers to inspect, training exercises with partners who responded. The machine required my participation, and I participated. The isolation had demonstrated what I was in the absence of function, a consciousness archiving data, counting dead civilians, speaking to empty armor. In the presence of function, I was. A consciousness archiving data, counting dead civilians, wearing armor that other people believed signified faith. No difference except the presence of witnesses. I am Sister Evangeline. 38 years of service to the Adepta Sororitas. And I have fought in 43 major campaigns. I have killed 2,896 confirmed enemy combatants. I have participated in purges that resulted in 427 civilian deaths. I have trained 147 novices in the methods of faith-based warfare. I have been decorated twice for valor, once for tactical excellence, 3 times for devotional purity. I do not believe the God Emperor is divine. I do not believe he protects. I do not believe my service is righteous. I believe I'm a component in a vast machine that converts human beings into compliance, that faith is the operating system that prevents components from recognizing they are components, that prayer is maintenance protocol and devotion is obedience conditioning. I cannot leave. Desertion results in execution. The Imperium's reach is comprehensive. I was trained for war and nothing else. I have no family, no connections outside the sisterhood, no skills except killing and praying. Where would I go? What would I do? I am a weapon wondering why it was forged, asking questions weapons are not designed to ask. I cannot stop. The conditioning remains. When the order comes to advance, I advance. When the prayer begins, I recite. When heretics are designated, I kill them. My body performs these functions because my body was trained to perform these functions. 38 years of repetition has made the performance automatic. I'm faithless, but my muscles remember faith. I'm hollow, but my voice produces devotional language. I'm broken, but my hands still maintain weapons. I know what I am doing. Saying that is the particular curse, awareness without ability to stop. The novice believes she serves righteously. The fanatic believes the emperor guides her bolter. They act without doubt. I act with absolute doubt and act anyway because the conditioning will not permit cessation. I execute purge orders while thinking, these are people. I recite prayers while thinking, these are empty words. I train novices while thinking, I'm teaching them to become as hollow as me. Sometimes I think I should warn them, the novices, so faithful, so certain. I should tell them the faith will die, not immediately. You will believe for years, maybe decades. You will find meaning in service. Then one day you will watch something that breaks you, an execution you cannot justify, a purge that targets the innocent, an order that reveals the system's true nature. And you will realize the emperor is not watching, or he is watching and does not care, or he is dead and we pray to machinery. The faith will die. But you will continue. Your body will continue. Your training will continue. You will become an automaton in sacred armor, performing devotion you do not feel, killing for causes you do not support, trapped in a life your body knows how to live but your mind no longer believes in. I do not warn them. Warning would be heresy. Heresy would result in execution. Also, they would not believe me. They are where I was at 14, faithful, certain, eager to serve. They cannot conceive of faithless service. They think faith and function are inseparable. They have not yet learned that the body can continue after the soul stops. Sister Celestine serves now in the Golan sector. I receive reports occasionally. She has distinguished herself in combat, demonstrated exceptional devotion, been promoted to Sister Superior. She leads her squad with the absolute faith I taught her. I wonder sometimes if she will break, or if she is constituted differently than I was. Perhaps some sisters believe until death. Perhaps I am defective, a weapon whose machine spirit failed while the weapon itself continued to function. Perhaps the hollow continuation is individual pathology rather than inevitable outcome. I do not know. I only know my own experience. 20 years of faith, 1 moment of fracture, 18 years of faithless continuation. I have 10 years of service remaining before retirement age, assuming I survive. Retirement means assignment to a convent as instructor or administrator. More decades of performing faith I do not possess. Teaching doctrines I do not believe, serving an institution I recognize as consumption machinery. Or I die in combat. That is the other option. A bolter round, a heretic's blade, a Xeno's weapon, an orbital bombardment. The manner is irrelevant. The result is cessation. No more counting, no more hollow prayers, no more watching novices become what I am. Just ending. I do not seek death. The conditioning prevents it. But I do not avoid it either. When the order comes to advance into hostile fire, I advance. When the mission requires risk, I accept the risk. I perform my function until my function ceases to be performable. That is what components do. I still count sometimes. 427. The number has not changed in 6 years. Garrison duty does not involve purges. But I remember them. The work-scarred hands, the devotional banner, the prayers pronounced perfectly in the moments before death. They believed. I killed them. Their belief did not protect them. My disbelief did not stop me. The Imperium spans 1,000,000 worlds. Trillions of humans serve its vast machinery. The Adepta Sororitas is one mechanism among thousands. Faith is one control protocol among many. I am one sister among hundreds of thousands, faithful or hollow or something in between. My individual crisis means nothing at this scale. The machine continues. Components fail, components are replaced. I will die, or I will retire, or I will continue until my body fails. Other sisters will take my place. They will train novices who will become sisters, who will train more novices. The cycle perpetuates. What the Imperium requires is not faith. What it requires is continuation. As long as I pray, regardless of whether I believe the prayers, the system functions. As long as I fight, regardless of whether I believe the cause is righteous, the wars continue. As long as I train novices, regardless of whether I believe I'm helping them, the next generation is produced. Sincerity is irrelevant. Performance is sufficient. I perform. I have performed for 18 years without faith. I will perform for 10 more, or until I die, whichever comes first. My body knows the motions. My voice knows the words. My hands know the weapons. What I believe does not matter. The man on Miriandel believed, but he prayed with work-scarred hands and perfect pronunciation. Sister Superior Cassiel shot him. His faith did not save him. My doubt does not doom me. We both continued exactly as the system required. He died, I killed, regardless of what we believed. That is what the Imperium costs. Not faith, not bodies, though it consumes trillions of those. What it costs is the recognition that none of it matters. The belief or disbelief, the righteousness or corruption, the prayers or silence. The system continues. The machine requires fuel. We are fuel. Faith simply makes it easier to burn. I burned my faith on Miriandel 18 years ago at 1441 Imperial Standard. But the burning continues. I continue. I will always continue. I am a sister of battle whose faith died but whose body remains. Speaking empty prayers, serving a dead god, and training the next generation to do the same. I am what the Imperium makes when it consumes completely. Awareness without escape. Function without meaning, continuation without hope. I pray at 5 o'clock tomorrow. The words will come automatically. The Emperor protects. I will say it and mean nothing, and continue. That is my testimony. I am Sister Evangeline. I serve in his name. I do not believe he knows my name. I do not believe he is capable of knowing anything. I believe he is a corpse on a throne, sustained by machinery and faith in the endless sacrifice of souls who believe their suffering means something. I serve him anyway, because I cannot stop, because the conditioning remains, because I am a biological automaton in sacred armor, performing devotion without faith, killing without righteousness, existing without purpose. The machine continues. I am part of the machine. That is all there is. The Emperor protects. I say the words. I do not believe them. I continue. Always, I continue.